So guys, I've been thinking about putting together a motorcycle build for the channel. And as I was mulling through the different brands and the different bikes that I thought would either be cool or interesting, there's one brand that kept popping up, and that was Harley Davidson. And the motorcycle would have been a 1200 Sportster. Now, the reason for this is when I was a kid, I remember the Bonneville T120 and the Harley Davidson Sportster being the street weapons of their day. I remember the racing heritage of Harley Davidson with flat track and with street racing, just from what I, again, remember as a kid, being very young at the time. This is the stuff that I really gravitated towards. I was never into like choppers or cruisers or anything like that. For me, it was all about the speed. Now, I remember the first time I saw flat track racing on TV. I was just absolutely taken aback by the skill set and just how cool that was. And so I thought that it would be pretty neat to put together a cafe racer that was kind of, well, who's the guy that's most famous for riding Triumphs and Harley Davidsons? Evel Knievel. Do like a red, white, and blue themed cafe racer, kind of in that spirit, if you will. So that is what began my journey, and well, this is where my story begins for you guys. And again, this is not really meant to be a criticism, it's just an observation from somebody who hasn't been around that brand for a long, long time. So let's dive into it. First of all, I haven't darkened the doorstep of a Harley Davidson dealership for the better part of 2 decades. And so when I got to my Harley dealership, well, let's start with the building itself. The place was absolutely huge. Once I stepped foot in the door of the place, things got a little bit odd for me. It was extremely clean. Everybody in this place was very polite. This was not a Harley Davidson dealership that I would have remembered from so long ago. As a matter of fact, it felt extremely eerie. The reason why I say that is because of just the regular architecture of the building. It was extremely Walt Disney, if you will. It looked like a lodge. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it just was a little bit of a distraction. The people there were unimaginably nice and extremely well knowledgeable. I can tell you this, if you were to ask any of the sales guys about some random bolt and its placement on the motorcycle, they could tell you the size off the top of their head. Far and away more knowledgeable than any other manufacturer sales staff that I've run into lately. But it was the building, it just felt odd. I almost felt like it was cartoonish in a way. Like if you were to ask an illustrator in a Looney Tunes flick to draw large motorcycle dealership, that's what this would have come across as. So anyway, I got past that, although I did start thinking I could find a Starbucks in this place at one point. I get past that, and I'm visiting with again, some of the most knowledgeable folks in the business, but it's the motorcycles themselves that really took me a minute to try to understand. And Harley guys, this is where I'm going to need your help. I don't know anything about Harley Davidson motorcycles in general. I mean, I know about Harley Davidson, but I don't know what all the different bikes' names are. It all turns into basically alphabet soup for me. But of the motorcycles that I got to check out, there was one that looks like an older 50s or 60s motorcycle, very classic. There's one that looks like an 80s inspired with the fairing in the bags, Softails, by the way. Then there's the regular Softail, and then that morphed into then the Breakout, the muscle cruiser bike, which is the only one that had an actual gauge. Because when I walked into that dealership, and after I got over the initial shock of the splendor of the place that I was in, I remembered that I was in there to look at motorcycles. And my recollection of Harley Davidson is incredibly analog machines with a tach and a speedometer, an engine, a throttle, a clutch, a gear shift, and really being a bare bones, very raw machine. But what I saw was something that looked like the motorcycle that I remember, but it had been morphed with some strange technology. These things had LCD screens that look like something out of like what you would see in an electronics store, like computer monitor sized things on these bikes. They look completely out of place. Now, in the demonstration that I was shown, the display itself was amazing, but that's not what I want for a motorcycle that is harkening back to this type of heritage. Again, it really threw me off. And then there were the motorcycles that seemingly had no gauges at all. I was really not interested in any of those bikes necessarily, but they had some little screen thing near the handlebar. I don't know. I wasn't about to start messing with it because at this stage of the game, there's something else that threw me off about the bikes. See, when I was much younger, the one walking point that I remembered about Harley Davidson was that they were all ergonomically perfect. The weird thing about Harley Davidson that I would always argue in their favor for is the fact that when you sit on a Harley, everything fell perfectly into place, where your feet rested, where your hands landed. The way that the bike felt underneath you was all incredibly good. In fact, it was the benchmark standard as far as I was concerned. But these machines did not walk with that mindset. In fact, well, at the risk of sounding rude, the motorcycles felt like a copy. And as a matter of fact, the whole experience felt incredibly corporate, if you will. Again, that Disney-esque, very corporate sense that I had. But the weird thing about the bikes is that they too felt like a copy of a copy. Or as you would expect if, say, a manufacturer decided that they wanted to start making motorcycles like Harley, that looked like Harley Davidsons, but we're putting out maybe a more inexpensive product to compete with the bikes that I was just describing from my youth. This is what you would find. Poor ergonomics, weird foot placements. Oddly enough, they felt like they were designed for somebody that might have been a maximum of 5'7" or 5'8". Nothing about these bikes was familiar. And then another thing that I noticed was on one of the Softails that I was sitting on, it had a stage 1 intake on it, which is this 90-degree elbow off the right-hand side of the engine. I go to sit on this bike, and before my foot hits the peg, my shin smacks that elbow. And then sitting on this bike, there was no way you could ride this thing without always bumping your shin into that snorkel. Felt very weird, not very Harley. This was something that the bikes of old, they would never have allowed such an oddity or such an oversight go through. So guys, my experience with the dealership, again, the folks there, unimaginably knowledgeable. Again, the best in the business so far as I can tell. But nothing that I could possibly take home with me in the new motorcycle section of that place anyway, was anything that I would ever be personally interested in. A weird amalgamation between old school and new, but not in a good way, in a very uncanny valley kind of way. Very corporate and very just not Harley as far as I was concerned. So guys, post up your comments. If you're a Harley guy, fill me in. Are you feeling the same way about the bar and shield? Let me know if that is exactly how you feel, or if I'm somewhere or somehow wrong about this. Let me know about that too, and we'll catch you on the next one.